we're going to do things slightly differently this morning, just very slightly differently. We're going to have our passage read in a moment, and Joey and Zedidah, I knew I would do it. Zoe and Jedidah are going to come and read it. But just before they read it, I want to give a little introduction. Am I coming through okay? It feels echoey. That's good. The adults in the church have been doing a series on mountains, and mountains in the Bible. And the passage that Glenn chose for today is the Sermon on the Mount. Now, with those two pieces of information, you would think that the passage today takes place on a mountain. But it probably doesn't. Glenn's going to question me on it. I did my exegesis on this, Glenn. The word is oros in Greek, and it can refer to a mountain, but it also can refer to a hill. And this passage takes place at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, when word was getting out about him. And word was getting out, this is a person that you might want to listen to. He's got some interesting things to say. And do. In fact, he started to do some healings. And the crowds came, and they were gathering, and they were gathering, and they were gathering. And Jesus is on the shores of the Lake Galilee, and he's like, well, I don't have any fancy tech, or I don't have any kind of sound systems. And he went up the mountain a bit. And he went up so that they could see him, so that he could project. He gathered his kind of disciples, and there was some question about who those disciples were at that time. And it says he opened his mouth and he taught them. And the passage that Glenn's given me is 3 chapters long. Matthew chapter 5, chapter 6, and chapter 7, and we will not be going through them all. You'll be glad to know. But at the end of chapter 7, it says all the crowd were astonished at his teaching. And the Greek word means literally struck out. It's like a big ton of bricks that came and struck them out. All the crowd were astonished at his teaching. And I hope this morning, by the end, you might feel a little bit astonished by this teaching. C.S. Lewis, who wrote the Narnia books, if you've heard of the Narnia books, was once asked if he cared for the Sermon on the Mount. He replied, as to caring for the Sermon on the Mount, if caring for here means liking or enjoying, I suppose no one cares for it. Who can like being knocked flat on his face by a sledgehammer? I can hardly imagine a more deadly spiritual condition than that of a man who can read that passage, the Sermon on the Mount, with tranquil pleasure. So if by the end of today you're feeling tranquil pleasure, something's gone wrong here. Another person, John Stott, said that this is the best known, least understood, and least obeyed passage in the Bible, the Sermon on the Mount. And an English professor at university assigned this to her students to read as a text. And one student in their evaluation wrote, "The things asked in this sermon are absurd, extreme, stupid, and unhuman." And the professor said that she had never thought about that. She'd been brought up with it. She's like, oh, it's nice. He's on the shores of the lake and he's chatting to his friends. It had never occurred to her to be angry about this. So what does the passage say? You're like, you're ready for it, aren't you? So I'm going to ask Zoe and Jedidah to come up and to read a little bit. We're going to just really focus on the end of chapter 5, and they're going to read it to us.
You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would...
That's her dad turning her down. Dodgy, isn't it?
If anyone... If anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him take your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you.
But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do you not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not the Gentiles do the same?
Thank you very much. Thank you, girls. Now, we're going to think about it, but normally I am out with the teenagers on a Sunday morning, and Mum is with the kids, and I have to confess that we give them some sweets. And so we decided that for you all this morning, we're going to hand out some sweets. And I'm going to ask some people to hand them out, but while they're being handed out, there's going to be 2 clips that I'm going to show that are going to help us to think about ways that we respond when people are annoying. So we'll show the clip.
Can't believe they're going to kill Buckley. It's just too horrible.
Just got worse.
I tell you, Father said I can keep the hippogriff's head. Yeah. I think I'll donate it to the Gryffindor's common.
Wicked.
Oh, this is going to be rich.
Look who's here.
Ah, come to see the show.
You foul, loathsome, evil little cockroach!
Hermione, no! He's not worth it. Malfoy, you okay? Let's go. Come, quick. Let's go.
Run for the word to anyone, understood?
That felt good.
Not good. Brilliant.
Somebody has bugged you, has annoyed you, insulted you, degraded you, done something that just really got under your skin. It might have been this morning, it might be last week, it might have been years ago that somebody did something. And I want you to think about how you responded to that situation. Now, in that last clip there, Draco had done something really horrible, and Hermione had had enough, and she just socked him in the nose. She had just had enough. Maybe that's the way that you responded in that situation. Maybe you were more like the man in the Mr. Bean clip who just goes off. He just kind of, whatever, I'm not gonna fight this. Maybe you're like a 4th-year pupil that I had a few years ago that came to my mind this week, who I was in my classroom, not in here in Aberdeen, and I heard a teacher shouting at this kid out in the hallway. And I hate when teachers shout at kids, but this teacher was really going at the kid. And the kid came into the classroom after the teacher had finished shouting, and he just sat down and he looked so demoralized, and he just went, didn't even do what she said I'd done. And he was so depressed and he was so sad. But he had just taken all that at him and just walked away. I wonder if that's how you respond in situations where people bug you. Or maybe it's a kind of combination of lots of them. Nietzsche, a philosopher that we study at school, speaks about ressentiment, which is where outwardly you're passive and inwardly you are seething with all the imaginary ways you would get revenge on this person. So fight, kind of flight, or some kind of internal combination of the two. Now we're going to do something we don't do in church, but I do at school every day. I'm going to ask you to talk to the person beside you. And I imagine you know the person beside you, but just have a quick think with them. Do you tend to fight or run away or some combination of the two? Just 30 seconds to tell the person beside you what you do. And you go. What do you do? What do you do? You go away. Like this. Well, I had some interesting chats down here. Let's take a quick vote. Again, I do this at school. I have to put your hands up. Is anybody here a fighter? Anybody a punch in the nose? Glenn? I suspected. Some people at the back, maybe. The conversation down here was it depends who it is. You know, like if it was a sibling, you might stop them. Anybody like Mr. Bean guy, just go away, don't engage in the conflict. Anybody just avoid it? Yeah, a few. Anybody like Nietzsche? Anyone got this ressentiment where they like seethe inside and imagine? Yeah, that's me. That's what Nietzsche said. We would be like, imagine all the ways you're going to get them. There. So we're going to go to our passage and we're going to see if our passage can help us to work out what to think this morning. And you might think it's obvious. You might think that the passage is pretty clear that we are to be passive, but, well, let's just be astonished, right? Let's just be like the disciples that were listening to Jesus. So, in order to do this, I need 2 volunteers, and when I say volunteers, I need Glenn to come up and hit Jonathan, if he was come up and do this. Yeah, I thought you could. Pastor and treasurer bust up on the stage. We're going to do this. So, the passage is quite specific. It says, if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, and this is where our cultural knowledge lets us down quite a bit. So the people that would listening to Jesus would know some things that we don't know. What they would know is that you never used your left hand, because your left hand was unclean, and your left hand was used for things like wiping your bottom, right? So you weren't ever allowed to use your left hand for anything. And if you used your left hand, even to gesture, like even doing this, I would be fined, or I would have to cleanse myself, or I would have to do something because I'm the one that's doing the pointing or the things with my left hand. So when Jesus said, if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, everybody that was listening, the great crowds, would know that you couldn't use your left hand for that, because then Glenn would be unclean. So Glenn, you can't use your left hand. So how do you, Now, fun fact about Glenn. Glenn was the first person that I heard refer to this as the hairy side. University, that tells you what university was like. The hairy side. You have to, wait, is that's not inappropriate, that's fine. You have to backhand them. Try again, let's get it, that's good. Oh, there we go. You had to backhand. Now, who backhanded? And again, this is where the people that were listening would get this. The people who backhanded in that culture were the masters to the slaves. Sometimes parents to children, sometimes husbands to wives. None of that's ever good. But the purpose of a backhand was to insult, to degrade, to humiliate somebody, to make somebody feel worthless. It wasn't really to cause physical pain, because there's different ways to cause, I was going to say better ways, but that doesn't mean that, different ways to cause physical pain. So you would backhand somebody to put them in their place. The pastor putting the treasure in his place. That's good, isn't it? Yeah. Typical. So Jesus says, If anyone strikes you on the right cheek, and everybody knew that was the master slapping the slave to degrade them. And what would they expect the answer to be? The slave would cower, head down, feel kind of inferior. Please don't hit me again. Please don't hit me. So then when Jesus says, turn the other cheek, what is he saying? And this is the point where they'd have all gone, we try it? Turn the other cheek. Yeah. Then why did they do that? Why were they like, oh my goodness, this is amazing? Because what Jonathan is saying by turning the other cheek, how does Glenn hit him? He has to hit him with his right hand. He has to hit him like that or sock him like that. But either way, who hit like this? Not masters and slaves. This was two masters. This was equals and the way the equals fought at the time. So Jonathan slapping the other cheek, Glenn has the choice. Does he hit him like an equal? Does he not hit him? Either way, the act here is revolutionary. It's not what we often take it to mean, that someone's just like, if someone hits you, turn around and let them hit you again, and then let them hit you again, and then let them hit you again, and just don't stop. It's saying, stand up for yourself. Stand up and say, I am a human. You can't treat me like this. I'm important. And so if the person hits them again, wow, they've made a really strong statement. Thank you, boys, for helping me with that. I appreciate it. Anytime you can hit Jonathan. And so it was genuinely astonishing, this revolutionary act. And the challenge that Jesus was giving to the people then was saying, don't be passive if people are insulting you and doing this. Don't fight back. You know, he doesn't say if someone slaps you on the right cheek, sock them. He says, stand up, be creative, be non-violent, but don't be passive. And there's lots of times in history where people have done this. So Rosa Parks, I know some of you have studied Rosa Parks, in school, on the bus. That was one revolutionary thing. Martin Luther King. Now, these are not perfect people, but they were trying to be non-violent, but stand up against injustice. And I've got a picture. There's some people in America just now who are trying to do this. Excuse me. Jonathan, do you want to go get some water? These are some people. This guy's called Shane Claiborne, and if you've not heard of him, then it's worth checking out. And they have taken the verse in Isaiah chapter 2, which says, beat their swords into plowshares. And they've been so disturbed by all the gun violence in America and all the shooting that they've not just gone, oh, whatever, can't do anything about it, can't change the laws, can't do anything. And they've not gone out and hunted down all the people that have guns and shot them, obviously. What they have done is they've asked people to hand in their guns. And they've turned them into garden tools. That thing at the top there, they've turned them into trowels and pitchforks, and they're taking this roadshow all around America to try and make the point. This is not okay that people are being shot. This is not okay that the gun violence that we have. We're not going to be passive about it, but we're going to be creative. We're going to use our imagination, and we're going to be non-violent, but we're going to stand up against oppression and against these bad things that are there. So that's one way that people are doing it. So how do you do it? What do you do now going out into your everyday life when somebody insults you and humiliates you and degrades you? What do you actually do in that situation? And this is the point that I get stuck at. Because the Bible says that we have to love them. That's the passage, the next bit in red on the screen. We're called to love our enemies. And it's not optional. Like, it's not like, well, if you like to do it, or you feel like doing it, or you can wait until you actually have those emotions and then you can love them. It says, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. How can you genuinely want what's best for somebody who is mistreating you, who is your enemy? Well, I don't think, unless you all know differently, there's any easy answer to that. I don't think there's one size fits all. I don't think there's like a quick fix that I just tell you this and you do this and it all works out okay. And in fact, maybe before we get to loving our enemies, we need to see our place in this whole picture. Maybe, as the passage says, we need to remember that we are children of God, that we are beloved children, that God looks at us, that God looks at each one of you and says, oh my did an amazing job when I made you. You are so precious to me. I know you all the way down to the bottom. I know everything about you. I know even the number of hairs on your head. And I love you. And I wonder if it's something that flows out of that awareness of the way that God feels about us that helps us when we face our enemies. That Jesus said, I love you so much I died for you. While you were enemies, I died for you. And out of that, maybe, we can begin to love our enemies, to have the courage to turn the other cheek, to have the courage to stand up against injustice. But I think we also need supernatural help. Don't go and try and do it by yourself, because it won't work for long. There's a book that Douglas Copeland wrote, and he wrote a short story, and this is a quote from the short story. Now, here is my secret. I tell it to you with an openness of heart that I doubt I shall ever achieve again. So I pray that you are in a quiet room as you hear these words. My secret is that I need God, that I am sick and can no longer make it alone. I need to God to help me give because I no longer seem to be capable of giving, to help me be kind as I no longer seem capable of kindness, to help me love as I seem beyond being able to love. We need help to turn the other cheek. We need help to love our enemies. And we need to pray. And so we're going to pray.